Welcome to the American Reformer Podcast, hosted by Josh Abatoy and Timon Cline. Our mission is to promote a vigorous Christian approach to the cultural challenges of our day, rooted in the rich tradition of Protestant social and political thought.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the American Reformer Podcast. Usual host here, Timon Cline, Editor-in-Chief, and we've got another Editors Roundtable episode for you today. I'm joined by Mike Sabo and Ben Crenshaw, both editors at American Reformer. Guys, thank you so much for joining to talk about the day's events. And, of course, what's the main news currently and what's on everyone's mind is the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which at time of recording is over a week ago. If people were following along at American Reformer, there was a sort of very, very organic and in a lot of ways surprising outpouring of, desire to sort of express appreciation for Charlie, reflect on his legacy and all this. So we published, I kind of decided early we'd publish as many pieces as people sent within reason, because everyone really wanted to have a chance to express, what he meant to them. So it was great to see that. It was great to see readers appreciate those pieces, and them get broad reach. And of course, almost everywhere has done the same thing. There's been plenty of other great reflections on Charlie at our friends at First Things, at American Mind. We recommend those pieces as well. So we won't sort of regurgitate or reiterate that aspect of this discussion and what people have already said. Just commend those reflections to you. What we want to talk about today, I think, is what this event and its aftermath mean for the right and for American politics going forward. So we'll open it up with, I think, the question that has emerged and is kind of on everyone's mind on the right now is what this means for the coalition. This has been a total unifying moment beyond the right, but certainly on the right. You've seen a lot of not just implicitly but explicitly calls for unity and kind of seizing the moment, this opportunity, because a lot of factional divisions that have always been there and are part of any coalition, but were somewhat tampered down going into the election last year, had in many ways resurfaced as you're starting to govern and as you're talking about policy and direction and these sorts of things. But this is really once again suppressed those in a way, those divisions. And I think it's a good thing. I think the unity on the right is sort of at its peak right now. And so what we want to talk about is how to make this last and how to take wins from it against the left. So, Mike, you touched on this at time of recording. Your piece has been out for, I think, about a day now. Or did it come out today that we're recording? I don't know.
I think it's going to be out today.
Okay, today. It's good. By the time the listeners hear this, it's already been out. But I lose track of when I read them and when they actually go public. But Mike, you wrote on this, I think very well, covering sort of the main points of what needs to be discussed and considered in this regard for the coalitional balance and coalitional unity on the right and what it looks like moving forward. So maybe kick us off with a brief overview of what you wrote about, and we'll riff on that for a bit.
Sure. So, and before I start with that, just want to say, continued prayers for Erica Kirk, for the Kirk family, for the two kids, especially for our nation. There's certainly, upheaval going on right now in a big way. There's political violence coming from, really the left's base, which I think even their own politicians have been concerned about it. I saw a poll, I think it was a couple months ago, where they're, even Democrats are hearing their base saying, hey, we shouldn't even be living with this people. Let's really do something about it. Let's take it in our own hands. So I think that is all unfortunately coming to pass in a big way. And it's certainly not good for the health of our nation, but, so continued prayers definitely. But like you said, I mean, we're in a moment where there's unifying, there is more interest in kind of working together. I think I just kind of go back to 2016, where Trump really kind of rolled over a lot of the kind of fights that kind of used to happen on the right, neoconservatives versus paleocons versus more, natural rights, say Claremont, that kind of thing. And so I think you not only have, obviously with that time, Trump, but then you also had the threat of Hillary Clinton. And I think you saw that in 2020, and then you certainly saw that again in 2024, where, philosophical disagreements we may have really pale into comparison to say, hey, we got to work together and actually save the country. This isn't just wood paneled hall, theoretical stuff that, kind of some of the mainstream conservatives act like it is. Like, we are in an existential war and we need to win. They need to lose. That doesn't mean that we do what the left does, which is just take up arms and do what we want to do. But what that does mean is this is serious, and we need to put together a host of serious proposals that actually look at reality. And so that's what I wrote about. I mean, there's so much energy right now. There's a groundswell of support. And really the crucial project is going forward is how do we channel this energy and enthusiasm toward productive ends? And so I wrote about, really kind of how to do that. At the American Mind, we actually published a really good and important detailed policy memo by a fellow at the Claremont Institute, Kyle Scheidler. And he is a national security expert, and he really lays out in detail what should the Trump administration do? So he calls it a whole of government approach that's really spearheaded by the Department of Justice, and that really seeks to take down kind of the numerous organizations that are, on the left, that are on the far left, the radical networks. And that really spans from Antifa to Maoists to various communist organizations. And those communist organizations actually do have direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party, to other countries. So, I mean, this is real. It's amazing that I think even I was reading this and I was kind of stunned that, I mean, this isn't just kind of common knowledge. And really what the Trump administration, unfortunately, I mean, we really live kind of in a bureaucratic order. They need to first, this is going to sound weird, really convince the bureaucracy, hey, far left extremism does exist. We need to create this category. We need to give accurate, detailed, and precise definitions of the ideologies that are implicated, the players, their funding sources, the strategies they use, the leaders, the foot soldiers, the interactions with similar groups. Scheidler kind of writes about, it's kind of like an orchestra, like they play kind of their separate parts, but they really come together as kind of a functioning, cohesive whole. They accomplish things kind of despite lacking a single entity that directs and coordinates the operation. And that's actually another thing. I mean, I know the right focuses, and I think rightly, a lot of times on George Soros and all the money he's pouring into U.S. politics and what he's doing. And those things are, need to be looked at and are detrimental to our country. But at the same time, there is no one kind of James Bond-esque, supervillain who's kind of controlling everything from a penthouse. I mean, there are tons of networks and organizations and institutions that are out there that are doing this. There's front organizations that look like, they're, say, single issue political advocacy groups, say in the environment or abortion, that really compete with each other. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's kind of like the mafia in a way. I mean, there's so much kind of obfuscation about what's going on. But if you've ever wondered, I mean, how does the left, kind of get, their thugs out on the streets for elections? I think of 2017 when Trump was inaugurated, and you had, DC, parts of it just burning down, cars burning. Basically what happened with ICE in California just earlier this year, where you had an ICE facility get under attack. I mean, how does that happen? How is this coordinated? You had an ICE facility in Prairiefield, Texas, actually just earlier this year, get attacked by, a group of armed Antifa people from, I think, North Texas. So we have to look at this seriously, and we have to take, basically defeat and dismantle these networks. And I think that is just absolutely the key to what we do going forward. I saw President Trump designated Antifa a major terrorist group. That could be the right solution. Scheidler actually says we may actually first want to focus on designated foreign Antifa groups. That'll actually be slower, but he thinks in his understanding of the bureaucracy, that'll actually work better. And then too, we need to go to like a whole of society approach too. Jonathan Keeperman Lomez, he's talked about, creating a Charlie Kirk National Park, establishing a Smithsonian exhibit on the woke era. Donors should give money to support the creation of endowed chairs at universities. They should fund the establishment of think tanks or independent scholars to really study far left extremism. You should have, long form podcasts start. And unfortunately, I know a lot of the history podcasts, lean unfortunately heavily left. And so you're probably going to want to start, a lot of new ones, but that should be done. I think this is, I just came with this idea when I was writing this piece. Brian Burrow, his vital book, Days of Rage, that needs to be turned into a documentary series or a movie or something, sold to Netflix or Amazon. Part of the problem is the content from the right is just not there. And so we need to basically launch kind of an all-out kind of, media blitz to really put our stuff out there. And so that's, at least some of the things we can do. I'm sure there's a lot more than that, but, we need to get serious. And I think that's at least, somewhat of a good start at doing so.
Yeah. No, a lot of it is just helping the right think the way the left does in terms of solidifying their gains, because all these things are things that the left has done in recent memory. Right. We've pointed out or many have pointed out that, investigations into conservative nonprofits and organizations by the IRS during the Biden administration. We'll talk more about speech, hate speech, and free speech in a little bit. But same thing. The Douglas Mackey case is sort of one of the biggest ones. These are and then the symbolic, I think, as Lomas puts it, some symbolic markers are very important. And if they weren't, the left wouldn't care to produce them. Right? They have. And they do all over the place, or they wouldn't care about tearing down ones that are contrary to their own messaging, right? Which they also care about. And clearly these things are effective. But as I was reflecting on this question and read your piece, read Kyle's piece, I've been reading. It's a biography of Samuel Adams because I'm going to read all of them. There's only like 10, so it's a totally doable. And it's specifically on his sort of career as a propagandist. And this is what's great about it is like as you were discussing how the left actually works, this is somewhat Yarvin analysis as well with the cathedral. It's like there's no one pulling the strings. It's just they all believe the same things and they live in the same world. But the way, Samuel Adams sort of created, as Jefferson and Adams recognized, like created the revolution himself, right? They call him the father of the revolution, is in the same kind of way, like out of Boston, right? He is able to, there's like rival street gangs. He's able to get them to show up and do the same thing at the same time, even though they hate each other, like they usually fight, but he gets them to show up and like, create bonfires and burn the Pope in effigy and like do all these funny things. He funnels, all kinds of stuff through the press that just conditions opinion and sort of gets people riled up. He's in like multiple different innocuously named societies or like civics organizations that are actually subversive. And he hangs out in those, but his name is like never attached to anything, right? So he's able to just kind of move people the way they already want to go, and then like push play, right? So it's like he's not pulling the strings, but he's like encouraging everyone to kind of do what they were, born to do, you might say. And it's just all it is like a window and description to. It's obviously not talking about the left. It's just like how these things work. And the right, maybe because we're too nerdy, we want like org charts and like white papers, giving marching orders to everyone. So we have a really nice paper trail, and you can such that you could write a book about it and prove these things journalistically. That's just not how it works. So it is going to have to be all that to say if you want to combat this, it does have to be a comprehensive kind of assault, because you can't just say, well, we'll just strike, the beast at the head. We'll cut its head off and then everything else will fall apart. It's not clear that it would. Like, even if you totally neutralized nonviolently, neutralization in a financial way. George Soros. I don't think it would change anything overnight, right? It's just it's part of like a bigger network and machine that sort of is self-sustaining. So you couldn't be satisfied with that. You have to do multiple things. And then most importantly, Mike, I think what you pointed out is sort of you have to do some positive things as well for yourselves, such as the symbolic markers. But Ben, any thoughts from you on this topic? Coalitional unity, opportunities presented, how to consolidate wins and get new ones, and to capitalize off of the moment.
Sure, I definitely concur with what you and Mike are saying about the opportunity for not just keeping the coalition together, but further cementing maybe what were hazy boundaries of the coalition, moving the Overton window further to the right, clarity on the purpose and the tools and tactics and execution of keeping the MAGA coalition together, and bringing along those that can be teachable or can be taught, kind of what time it is. We've seen like a lot of normies waking up, a lot of parents texting their kids being like, okay, I get it. This is a bridge too far. You see incredible amounts of people going to church for the first time. And this is the power of Kirk, was that in a way, he's the perfect model for us. He had put American politics and Christianity together in such a beautiful way without compromising his faith. And he was a Protestant to boot, and a very outspoken proponent of the gospel, just preaching to kids on campus. In every instance, I've been watching Kirk clips a lot. He's very, very talented. I suspect that Frank Turek, the man in the white shirt who was standing right next to him when he got shot, Frank is an apologist. I'm pretty sure Frank had been teaching Kirk how to debate. So Charlie was very talented. But the point is that in every situation he had, like any topic of discussion that would come up, if he had a chance to redirect the student to Christian truth, to Christ, to an eternal hope, he would do it. So it wasn't that like his Christianity was compromised by his public witness and his organization around the TPUSA, but it's just the opposite. He used all of that as an opportunity to preach Christ. So the point is that, he was murdered for his faith, because he did. He was unashamed of Christ. He was brazen and public about, saying that if you believe in God, and if you take Scripture seriously, if you're a real Christian, that should impact how you live. It should impact what America should be like. And so I think this has a in God's providence, He's working to bring a lot of people to Christ. How many videos have I watched already of parents saying, we haven't gone to church for 20 years, but we have 2 teenage sons, and we suddenly realized we're not raising them right. We need to take them to church, or something to that effect. People are going back to church. People they're quitting their addictions or whatever. They want to speak out. They want their life to have meaning. People want to get involved politically. So this is a great opportunity for those of us who have long held and have been laboring in the trenches for a proper understanding of America as a Christian people, as a Christian nation, with a kind of divine mandate or blessing. I'm not going to say manifest destiny, but there's clearly a Christian people trying to live together politically, socially, religiously, so forth. This is a perfect opportunity for us to welcome in a lot of other people who have been reluctant to think of America that way. They see in Kirk a model. And at the same time, it might be an opportunity to what's the right word? To chastise maybe those in the conservative movement who are dragging their feet and still think it's 1980. And, to kind of redraw those boundaries. Now, I will say real quick, I did listen to Aaron McIntyre with his podcast with Jonathan Kieferman or Lomas. And in terms of keeping this coalition together, one of the really important things is future presidential elections, because any work that's going to effectively dismantle the left, to target it, to to take it down, to neutralize its extremities, it's gonna take a decade at least or longer. So we need to win the presidency. Well, we need to do well in the midterms and then the presidency in 28 and 32 and so forth. So we need to think of the coalition as an important foundation going forward, a political coalition for future presidential wins. And this isn't some kind of concern that, wow, now we've opened a Pandora's box, and if we lose in 28, what are the Democrats going to do to us? Like, they already were doing all that years ago, this past Biden's administration and so forth. The point is that to be effective in actually preserving America, preventing us from sliding into civil war, we need a strong political coalition to be able to win elections and continue on with vision, clarity, backbone, conviction, political will to do the job of defeating the left completely. So I think it's very important, and we need to keep talking about it, strategizing, both holding a firm line and being gracious to those who are eventually coming around. Like, look, all of us came around. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but I came around because I realized something was off, and I listened to people, and I read books, and I changed my mind. Other people can change their minds too. We've got to give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think it's important. Two things as you were talking. One, now another Samuel Adams anecdote came to mind, or a line actually, where he says the most important thing is to put your enemy in the wrong and keep him there with your messaging. Right, so this is a famous line of his. This is something. There's other things we could have and have been saying, but it doesn't stick quite the same way, at least for broad popular appeal. But this can't be let go in terms of how in future elections as going forward. This has to stick to the left, for the foreseeable future. That they were the ones who resorted to political violence, and they're the ones who were locking people up, and they're the ones who are making threats, and so on and so forth. You can blame it, say it's their shock troops or whatever, but ultimately it's with them. So the people running for office, this needs to be hung around them every time, and justifiably so. This is not sort of a cynical move. This is the state of affairs. And so I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm not quite black-pilled as to say that we can never lose ever again. But you definitely need to win, and you should want to, and now more than ever, if you want to. I'm like you, Ben, not so much for like, oh, we can't let them get back in power because now they're going to do worse things to us. Because I think we've already seen what their playbook is, and they run it quite well, and they've been doing it for a long time. But mainly so that we can actually accomplish something. We need to string together some wins to actually affect change, lasting change that can't easily be undone with a series of executive orders on the first day of a Democrat getting in office. Right? These need to be things that are much more difficult to unravel, which the left has done for decades. Right? I mean, we still are trying to unravel what FDR was able to accomplish. These things are, if you do it the right way, they're very difficult to get rid of. So I agree with that, and we need to just maintain the narrative that is in play right now, and that has broad popular appeal, is resonating with people because they had to watch it on a screen. Is that you're looking at the left, and better than even that, look at all their responses. Look how they've reacted to this. Right? They just are very honest. Actually, it's great. And this needs to never be forgotten. People need to just watch montages of the responses every day for the next 4 years of how these people reacted to this. Right. So, I saw that clip last night with, Rainn Wilson's podcast, Dwight Schrute, which I never listened to. I saw the clip where he was saying he went to some party afterwards, and he's admitting this, that all his friends were kind of, dancing on Charlie Kirk's grave. Obviously all liberal Hollywood people, maybe no surprise, but he's like admitting, and that it kind of like shocked him, so even though I don't expect Rainn Wilson to vote for, whoever we want him to vote for, it may make him less effective as a proponent of the left, and so we should welcome that. And then lastly, Ben, that you brought up, we need to be like, the right needs to be very hospitable to latecomers. No purity spiraling, no like weird litmus tests. Did you read Pat Buchanan in 1993 or not? None of this. People coming late need to be just totally welcomed. It's good for people to change their minds about things. And if they didn't change their minds in this situation, that would be strange. It is something that should change people's views, and they should be commended for it. So none of that, the coalition should grow, and don't expect people to be like, keeping pace with the Overton window, even as they're coming over to our side. Like, allow for the time of catechesis that the rest of us went through. So I totally agree with that. And that needs to be the general attitude, and don't be policing the right in any regard, of who's late to the party and who's been there a long time. That's totally counterproductive. So this is a situation where it's like, this is normie grab time. You should be grabbing as many of them as you can, and you don't need them to do much. You need them to do a few things. You need them to be comfortable saying they. If they will say they or them, total win. They're on our side, right? That's all you have to get them to do, is to start recognizing the existential nature of our politics at this point, and to realize, and the second tenet might be to realize, not just that they're stuck in 1980, that some of them are stuck in 2015, and decades have happened since then. So getting them out of 2015 even, and their general assessment, which is like basically Obama hangover, and that they have a certain view of what our national politics is like. And so if this breaks them out of that, and to realize we are at like a fundamental level of debate, we're not debating Obamacare and tax codes. We're debating the nature of our society, and who's going to be allowed to participate in it. So in any case, this I think leads us well. Ben, we'll swing back to you first. There's going to be part of the reason we have to embrace newcomers to the coalition, even at this late stage. And I think we'll have to do that again if, God willing, J.D. Vance wins in 28. We'll have to do it again, because there's plenty of people that are much more comfortable with Vance than they are with Trump. And there will be some basically functionally never Trump people that come along then. We'll have to do it again, and we should. But they're, especially because there are going to be people that are ostensibly on the right or right leaning or like centrist, former leftists that got freaked out by woke, intellectual dark web. This is like Barry Weiss and these people, Mike Pence, as we saw, who are going to basically insert themselves to say, hey, feather the clutch. What if the shoe is on the other foot? And they're getting, what if they were getting all the conservatives fired from all the late night talk shows? What if they did that? Because you guys have so many of them. This is wrong. What if they were getting all the conservatives fired from their Ivy League chairs? That would be terrible. And they're going to say, this is not how we behave, and we need to slow down, and this is our chance to set right the intellectual or the political climate. So what do we say about these arguments, this sort of moral equivocation between the right and the left, this slow down, you don't know what you're doing, and if you do this, then they're going to start like scrutinizing right-wing organizations, and they're going to start throwing people in jail for memes, and this would be crazy if that happens. So what do we say to what's the best sort of defense against this these voices that are already popping up at this point, Ben?
Yeah, the irony is just, it's too rich to contain. You have to speak out. We are in some ways, we're in an enviable position because the left has already done all these things to us. So we know what they're going to do, and they they hold the levers of power, the cultural heights and entertainment and airways and media and so forth. And they already labeled us domestic terrorists, and they threw a bunch of J6ers in jail without any due process rights. So I do think, like, on the one hand, we need to be capacious in our ability to accept new people into the coalition, but we have to be as wise as serpents too. We need to realize there's going to be there are bad actors, there are people who disagree. So the Barry Weisses, who are supposedly new converts, the Glenn Greenwalds or whoever, these people are basically leftists who got canceled by radical lefts, by people who are more radical than themselves. But they're not really MAGA, they're not really conservatives. Perhaps they can be useful, but at the same time, we need to speak up against a lot of the obstructionism that they pose, because they're dead weight. And I did that this week with Barry Weiss, just doing, well, what if she was on the other foot, in 28, if whoever wins, say Gavin Newsom, what if he uses the FCC to shut down conservatives? And it's this kind of, contentless liberal neutrality in which we have this kind of shallow form without any substance. And we can't think about historically how Americans ought to wield political power, or the proper constitutional, moral, or religious content of this for the good end. So it is soulless, it's contentless, it's vacuous, it's boring, it's insulting to our intelligence, and it's obstructionist, if not positively detrimental to movement. So anyway, what do we do? I mean, we keep shifting the Overton window to the right. We make arguments against this ridiculous moral equivalency. In my article that just dropped this morning, I basically say, yeah, right-wing cancel culture is great. Free speech has necessarily within it intrinsic limitations, and we need to recover what those limitations are. And there's no moral equivalency between left cancel culture and right cancel culture, because we're not evaluating it based upon its external form. We're evaluating it based upon what is it canceling and why, for what purpose. I mean, conservatives were getting, who Brendan Eich, was that the guy at Mozilla who was canceled because he made like a $2,000 donation against gay marriage in California? I mean, the guy was basically holding to a traditional, historical, moral, and Christian understanding of marriage for the past 2,000 years. And he lost his job, and he was a CEO. He was worth millions. I mean, this isn't some just, steel mill worker in Pennsylvania or something like that. This is a powerful person in California, tech culture. So they're lopping off the heads of, capable, intelligent, accomplished people on the right for very sane, traditional, calm beliefs and political action, totally legal, contributing to, what was it, Prop 8 or whatever the proposition was in California. And so, no, like when we call up someone's employer for making a public video, gleefully, wickedly celebrating the public assassination of an innocent, good, and wholesome man, that is completely different than canceling Brendan Eich. I'm sorry, it just is. One person should lose their job and another shouldn't, because one person holds reprehensible views and has done something that is disgusting and uncivil, and another person holds very good, moral, wholesome views and is contributing to the good of society and his fellow citizens. That's the calculus. So there's just no moral equivalency. We just have to say that.
Yeah, I think this is something I hope that people will adopt or come to understand. They know it, but come to understand in their politics is the evaluation of the actual content and morality, objective morality of these things is the only way you can make these assessments, which every society does, and they're inescapable through whatever mechanisms and means these things are done and applied. So the question for people, for Christians especially, should be like, is it good or is it bad? That's not a hard hard assessment to make, and that should have political effects, right? If it's good or bad, what someone's doing, the way that they're living, what they're saying, how they're acting politically. So and you already laid this out. I mean, one in the case, two cases where comparing, one person has a good view, a moral view of the foundations of society and how they should be respected politically, and one has a reprehensible view. It's that simple. So one person deserves to maintain their job where they have influence and power and over other people, and one doesn't. I mean, I think that's very simple, and that shouldn't shock us that this is the evaluation. We've just, so many on the right, so many conservatives and so many Christians have just been, foolishly led into this view that it's a very proceduralist view, that the actual morality, the actual moral assessment is in this, whether or not you're going to let people say whatever they want. It's like the principle of doing the thing rather than the content, the principle based on the content of what's being produced. And this is not how anyone in the 18th or 19th century understood even our protection of speech, right? This is just not the purpose of it. They're too influenced by antiquity to understand speech any other way than being has to be moral. Reasoning is the point of the protection, which is part of being human. And if it's immoral reasoning, it's rightly cast out and defeated by whatever means. So the point of the protection is so that you can increase the morality of society through your speech and through your deliberation, not so that you can make it licentious. And there's obviously limits to which you can actually ensure that result, and that's fair enough. But when society decides, no, we don't like particular views that we think are detrimental to our body politic being expressed all the time, we're not going to throw you in prison or exile you, but you're not going to have a mouthpiece that we give you through, especially through publicly subsidized means like public universities or the airwaves, right, that we're paying for. We don't have to do that. So this like kind of assessment is very normal and natural. It's a good thing that it's coming back to the fore. And it's not just because the left does it. This is not purely reactionary. This is corrective in our moral assessment of our politics. So I think, people just need to get over this, in these objections of like both sidism or shoe on other foot stuff. Or, it's actually unprincipled, because the reason I think it's good is not, I think it should be done whether you think there's going to be reaction or retribution later from the left or not, because it's the proper thing to do. This is good for society. So anyway, rant sort of over. Mike, any thoughts on what Ben was covering there, and sort of combating these ridiculous people like Mike Pence they're going to come out and try to calm everyone down?
No, I think what Ben said is very important, and a very important lesson that the right, I think, still needs to learn in some respects. I mean, I think there's certainly a growing knowledge of these things, of just the natural things that bind polities together. I mean, John Locke talked about the law of fashion, that you need, kind of the informal constitution of mores, of traditions, of, ways of being, of decorum that you need to hold up, any kind of decent civil society, that those things are absolutely necessary. And that there's going to be, legal procedures, there's going to be legal means, there's going to be, violations of the law, but then there's also going to be violations just of, what do you want your society to be, and the guardrails that you want, and upholding those is really important. I think of like, the right's, kind of interest, especially in the new left. You read a guy like, say, Herbert Marcuse, and he has a book, or I think it was an essay actually, called Repressive Tolerance. And he talks about, two different views of tolerance, this kind of neutral tolerance, the left and the right are equal, or the repressive tolerance. I think he had some other name for it. I think it was liberation tolerance. And that was basically against, hey, we need to be tolerant of the views only of the left and not of the right. Okay, but where was he actually wrong, though? I mean, he wasn't wrong that there are some views that we don't need to be tolerant of. I think he just drew the line in the wrong place because he had the wrong morality ultimately. But I think conservatives can kind of almost read this like neutral lesson from that. But that's the wrong lesson. I mean, really, rather than, and I think it shows itself, returning to the marketplace of ideas. I think Spencer Cox and, unfortunately, Mike Pence and some others have talked about it in ways like that. Immediately returning to this marketplace of ideas, that is the wrong lesson. Like the right actually needs to confront the left on this claim. I mean, they have to reassert the conditions of civilized society itself. And this includes shunning certain opinions and behaviors that are inimical to any healthy polity. Like I said, there's a dense web of decorum laws, traditions, and those are things are always going to be present. And it's important that we uphold that. We see that in, the left, obviously, and even parts of the, I guess more the movement conservative right, going crazy over Jimmy Kimmel's suspension. Okay, but look, I mean, the First Amendment doesn't give anyone a right to host a late night show. Like, it's preventing Congress from enacting a law that abridges one's freedom of speech. ABC itself doesn't have a license. The FCC actually grants licenses to broadcast to local broadcasters. But again, that's a privilege that can be revoked. I mean, this is all in law. Mm-hmm. And corporations, too, they have grounds for suspending or firing individuals if they think the deportment, which basically means the character, behavior, or manners are out of step with the company's culture. And certainly lying and gloating about murder, I mean, which Kimmel did openly. He basically called the murderer, oh, he's a MAGA guy. This is one of yours. I mean, it's just straight open lie. Yeah. I mean, that certainly, I think, easily meets that threshold. And you compare it to cancel culture itself, which I think, again, the left, you saw what they did. I mean, they basically wielded, attacking, doxing, destroying the lives of anyone who basically dared voice a political opinion. That was essentially to a centimeter to the right of the Kevin Costner Yellowstone meme that we see constantly. And I think it was how they did it was bad. But the actual underlying principle, again, like Ben said, I think that's right. You have to have some kind of barriers. You have to have a threshold that's connected to the moral law. This, we see that in the way the American founders actually talked about free speech. And that was basically founded on the distinction between freedom and license. And I'm getting this from Ben and I, one of our grad school professors, Tom West. He had a great essay actually about this, about freedom of speech in American history and American founding, and then to modern liberalism. And he goes through this. And the founders basically preserved this kind of moral dichotomy through non-injurious speech versus injurious speech. Mm-hmm. The former was really one's natural right of liberty, and the latter, and there was absolutely a distinction made. In the latter, the injurious speech was viewed as speech that actually harms another's reputation or society at large, and that included personal libel, seditious libel, also speech that injures the public health or the moral foundations of society, other injurious conduct, say planning a bank robbery. And so that's the foundation that we actually have. I mean, forget the Warren Court, mid 20th century, turning of speech basically to this, open-ended fuzzy idea of expression. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is our history. This is our tradition. And we really need to get back to that in a big way. In a way, kind of the, this kind of informal category of hate speech, which, by the way, is not a legal classification, actually, American law anywhere. Like that, I think, in his attempt to do it. And I think there's arguments about, should we use hate speech now and get to a better thing later? Should we basically import the founders' idea of, say, what injurious speech actually is into hate speech? I mean, that might be prudentially, what's necessary right now. I think really with that too, we can't use the bureaucracy for our own ends. It's look, the left has used all these weapons. They've created them. I think the right does not have the luxury to just be very pure in what they use. I mean, they need to use everything on the table. I think eventually then you can, make the bureaucracy go away and you can get rid of some of these things. But I think now, we have to prudentially wield these things for our own ends, for the good of the nation. There's no time.
Unless you want to sit on your hands for 10 years,
Right. Yeah. So I think all those things are on the table. And I think, just the idea of hate speech, looking at it in a good way, I do think that does show just an urge, even if it's, used wrongly today, that does show an urge where it's like we do need to. There is an urge to recapture kind of this like moral understanding of the ground of the law, and I think that's exceedingly important.
Yeah, I think it's the common theme here is recapturing a moral evaluation of what we're doing, right? And especially the with speech itself. I mean, it's very the essay on human understanding from Locke that talks about the law of fashion. That's the most popular Locke work at the founding. That's what everyone reads. So this is actually the thing, and you'll see references to this particular point with the founders, way more so than the treatises on government. Everyone has sort of read this and they recognize that this unofficial or sort of customary law undergirding everything else is really what drives what feeds upward. But I think the moral assessment of these issues is not just what's needed, but as you said, it is faithful to the our founding. The reason speech is being protected so that you can deliberate about the best moral direction of the polity, not so that you can express your inner self wherever you want and on every street corner. They're not interested in that. It doesn't matter to them. And probably, I can't remember if West covers this or not, but I mean, the things are synonymous. The speech is almost synonymous with the press itself, right? These are going hand, because this is the political outlet to be able to. So, it should appear extremely obvious. It should be very obvious to people that at some level, at some point, you do make these judgment calls. Like nothing, speech even now is not unlimited. Even this free speech maximalists have to have limits on they do have limits on how far this would go. So the only question is, what's the thing that's informing the limitations? And you should have what's informing the limitations should be based on true morality. There's nothing else to say about it. So immoral things should be punished in ways that moral things cannot be punished. And the cancel culture stuff was like, it was like polemically effective to talk about it in a certain way. But the cancel culture was one direction, and it was canceling people for saying moral and true things and having moral and true opinions about at least things that should be entertained. If you're let's say you had a divergent sort of opinion on certain foreign policy matters of like what's best for the country, whatever, that's fine. But people are being canceled, like we said earlier, for very basic fundamental things. Cancel culture was an attempt to cancel like voicing reality and voicing your tradition. That's what it is. People should not think of it as this like free floating, unacceptable and immoral thing that if you ever cancel somebody, whatever that means, if you ever remove someone from polite society, that's what cancel culture does. Remove them from polite society and designate them as like second-class citizens is what it's doing. Removing all sort of ability to participate in discourse and in like holding positions of power. That can't be something that just is never possible or should never be done. That's something all societies do. And so the only real objection to cancel culture, which was a leftist thing, is they were doing it for immoral reasons and they were punishing moral people. That's it. I mean, I don't know what other assessment there is to give on that. So the right should not be allergic to these maneuvers because they've been used against you in a wrong-headed way. Like the abuse does not negate use. I think that's how we have to think of it. You can, and again, as you said, Mike, I mean, there may be certain ways that is like, cancel culture is very effeminate in the way that it approached things, very passive aggressive. I'm totally fine being more masculine in the way that we do it, if I can say that. So, in any case, Ben, go ahead on the while we're on this topic, we're getting into sort of speech itself and the hate speech question, which you've written on. I think is a good place for us to go next.
Yeah, before I say something about speech, I just want to make the note that if the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, was established in 1934 with the Communications Act of 1934. And if you go read the act, you'll find that the act says this. It says the FCC was created for the purpose of the national defense and for the purpose of promoting safety of life and property through the use of wire and radio communications. So within the very act itself, you have a moral purpose. It's for national self-defense, the protection of life and property and so forth. So it's absolutely appropriate, according to the original charter of the FCC, for them to put pressure on ABC to yank Kimmel. Like if you're purposely lying and mocking the assassination of an innocent civilian, yeah, that's endangering other people's lives. That's endangering the common good, the national defense, people's property. It's encouraging more violence. And so it's totally within both the political and the moral limits of the FCC. And people have lost this. I mean, I'm perfectly, maybe in another era we would have opposed, FDR and putting many of these agencies together and how they were originally formed and their purpose. But look, they're here. It's 90 plus years old at this point. It's not going anywhere. The charter is not terrible. It could be a public utility that's actually quite necessary, and so let's use it for our own purposes. Let's turn these agencies and bureaucracies for our good. We can do that. It's perfectly legitimate. There's nothing unconstitutional or un-American or anti-Christian about it. So just putting that out there, I have no problem.
I didn't mean to wear my shirt today. I have the shirt of the cartoon of FDR lighting his cigarette with the Constitution, and I usually wear that around. No one seems to get it, but it's a great shirt. But I think too, Mike touched on this as well, and this is a great line that Mike cut from one of my pieces at TAM one time. But Marsilius Apadua has this great line that's like, whoever gives the immunities or the privileges and these things, whoever grants them, which in this case is the federal government, to these news organizations to have airspace and all this, they obviously have the right to rescind it. There's not, it's like, people seem to believe once certain things are granted like this, which are totally positive, this is not a natural right that the FCC is managing. This is a total on the basis of public utility and a moral purpose, as you pointed out. This privilege is granted. It can be rescinded whenever its purpose is frustrated, or for any other reason. This is not something, that there's even a standard for how and when you can rescind something is crazy to me. As if there's, has to be accountability on the government for when it can rescind this privilege is wild to me. It should be able to do it with total discretion, as it should be able to in so many other things. So, that argument will just not land for me. The people crying about having pressure from the FCC on them. I'm like, your existence is because of the FCC. They can do this whenever they want. For whatever reason, I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. It can actually, in this case, be completely arbitrary if they wanted it to be. And I see no reason that wouldn't be defensible. But anyway, continue, Ben.
Yeah, that's a great point. So on the whole issue of free speech, I want to contrast the concept and the terminology of freedom of speech which was the founders' view, and was the view of Americans up to, even legally, politically up to the 1950s and 60s. So with the Warren Court, you have this evolution of freedom of speech to freedom of expression, which then comes to this idea of expressive speech, which it does get into this whole problem of it puts, opinion and conduct together. It smushes them together. And many of the founders thought, there's certain level of expression of opinion. That's fine. If you act on it, that gets into a different realm. But even then, they thought that, certain opinions were themselves harmful. So they didn't hold this fast view. But the problem with the Warren Court, first of all, is that they extended this kind of absolute immunity for speech into conduct. So now it's expressive, speech is this kind of the way you can speak by acting, and your actions are protected because it's now speech. So there's a problem there. But the real issue is that freedom of expression is not the same thing as freedom of speech. Behind the concept of speech is logos. Behind the concept of expression is phone. This is a Greek distinction between rational speech and noise. So the freedom of expression is just noise. You're just uttering something. It's just kind of whatever you want to get off your chest. It's kind of a bestial behavior. It's animalistic. It's just noise coming out of you. And we have now codified this as a right of the Constitution. You should make whatever disgusting noise you want, and it's a constitutional right. What
And,
the founders meant.
in fact, we should say some people under the protection of speech and public speech do actually act like animals, literally in public now. And I think this is no coincidence that they literally crawl around with dog costumes on and do this sort of thing publicly. So
Yeah, it's a perfect image for metaphysically and morally what's happening. But with the founders, freedom of speech, this concept of speech was a moral concept. It was the ability that humans have over and against and above the animals to be able to make a distinction between what is good and evil, what is ugly and beautiful, what is profitable and unprofitable, and so forth. Like, it is the ability to make that rational kind of leap in that to talk about transcendent realities, so that we can lift ourselves up, so we can kind of become the kind of the people that God designed humans to be. I hate to use the image of God thing, but like being reborn into the image of Christ, like in many ways. So it is a kind of moral speech, and therefore, by definition, the founders' conception of free speech has a moral horizon. It has a shared moral consensus. This is what is appropriate. This is not what is appropriate. If you start uttering and saying these things, you're no longer engaging in the realm of logos. You're becoming an animal and just destructive to the community through phone, just making noise. And so, as Mike said, they had the conception of injurious versus non-injurious speech. And it technically, I'm not against using the enemy's weapons against them if we could somehow retrofit quote unquote hate speech and shuffle all the founders' conception of injurious speech under that label and use it effectively. Fine. I think that's a hard sell for the American people right now. I think that the backlash against Bondi is going to show that hate speech won't really fly as a political or legal tool. But regardless, what we need to recapture is this idea of injurious speech. There is speech that can injure people: personal libel, seditious libel, criminal conspiracy, blasphemy, profanity, obscenity, and malicious speech, and so forth. It was quite extensive. And if you go read my article, like, I walk through some of the reasoning and the ideas there, from Joseph Story to Judge Kent to even Jefferson, is saying that there's an epistemic and moral purpose to freedom of the press. If the press is not, if they're basically just a propaganda arm of the government, they've lost the freedom of the press. You don't have to respect their freedom anymore. Like, they clearly have abandoned that or abdicated that duty, and so they don't deserve that protection.
Or if they've just demonstrated profound immorality, and their speech has been injurious to the polity, which we could easily say about the New York Times or anyone else. There's no reason to, don't go burn down the New York Times headquarters. That's a different, crime. But there's no reason to respect them and sort of defend their place in this. They're not morally deliberating. And I think Ben, just to sort of highlight something you're saying, the inherent in this is like, the journey is not the point. It's not like deliberation perpetually for the sake of deliberation, because deliberation is what we're all about, and debate and free. This is what we're about in this grand experiment. The point is to arrive at a conclusion, the proper and moral one for yourselves, and then to act upon it. So the point is the end. These are means to an end. The reason you want to protect and sort of facilitate real deliberation, real speech over moral things, is to make moral judgments, and then those are definitive and have to be acted upon. So this is like, most of the like stuff going under the guise of deliberation is just actually noise, because it's not directed towards an end. It's just to hear themselves talk because they think that's the value, even if they're not acting like animals in public. And so it really has the merger of expression and speech, which also is a problem for like the way we understand rights of conscience and these things, has degraded even the stuff that is attempting to be moral deliberation and making moral judgments. It's actually just pure noise most of the time itself, because people are denying that there has to be an endpoint that is actually definitive, that you do arrive at the proper conclusion. And if you're not trying to get there, like, what is the point of all this? And so that again brings us back to our distinction between things can be evaluated as good and moral, and other things can be evaluated as licentious and evil. And you're supposed to know what to do with that. It's not.
That's right.
So,
yeah, and the founding generation understood what the classics and the medievals understood, and that is that public opinion is the foundation of every political regime. Even a tyrant can't rule without some kind of public, embrace or acceptance that he either has the power to kill all his enemies and you better behave, or maybe he is necessary to overcome some greater evil. So they understood, like, absolutely you have to regulate speech. If the government absolves itself of regulating speech, it's consigning its own death. You can't have a functional civilization or society without caring about what people are saying. And now we live in a world in which we've abdicated that responsibility. Like, speech is politically neutral, it's socially neutral, it's morally neutral. It's just a complete, utter nonsense, totally un-American, has no connection whatsoever with the American founding or the colonial period or any time period in world history previously. So we are really living in this, like, a bizarre era of historical amnesia and moral kind of irrelevancy. And we have to push back against it. We have to recover the concept of injurious speech. We have to get comfortable with regulating speech. And of course, we have huge challenges, like any attempt by the Trump administration or any state legislature to regulate speech is going to be challenged in court. You're going to have to fight this up to the Supreme Court. You're going to have to challenge incorporation and say that this was the purview of the states. They should have this back. We have to get comfortable, thinking this way on the right, policing, properly policing ourselves, our own coalition, censoring the left. Nothing wrong with censorship if it's censorship of what's evil. You want that. And we even need to educate Tucker Carlson because he doesn't quite understand this. So that'll be a challenge, but we're up for it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's in some ways I like analogize it to well, it's kind of like other things that conservatives have done, even in your like jurisprudence generally, as a defense mechanism against basically the overhaul that the Warren Court introduced. And it's similar to the way we think about speech, because it was sort of rhetorically useful to maintain your ability to continue to speak, is to have this free speech maximalist libertarian sort of view that Tucker is expressing. But that is ultimately unsustainable. It's questionable whether it was even you shot yourself in the foot all along with this. And now is a very good time to offer a corrective in this way, because simply it's totally unsustainable to continue doing it this way. And you're right. I mean, even you're right to point out, like, even a tyrant has to worry about needs public opinion on his side. I mean, this is why in the late 17th and into the 18th century, like, why does anyone care how a monarch conceives of himself of having divine right or not? This is not like there's no like legally actionable mechanism on the basis of the divine right claim. It's a public opinion claim. So if you need this to be maintained for the legitimation of your rule, right? That you actually do have authority from God in ways that others could not. Without that, any monarch would struggle to rule, right? Because your station is questionable, and your performance can undermine like your legitimacy. So it's just like an illustration of every government is concerned with this for one reason or another, and especially a government like ours, or a founding like ours, that was more concerned than many other regimes, because of how they conceived of their own republican kind of model, with maintaining the virtue and morality of the people. This is a top level concern from like all the big name founders. Everyone can go look them up. Everyone cites sort of unthinkingly and flippantly all the famous quotes on this. So if you're concerned about the morality of your people as essential to the continuance of your way of life and your government, you're especially interested in public opinion and what's being proffered publicly and propagated to everyone. if you don't want to be concerned with that so much, you should have a different form of government, so people can choose which is more precious to them, I suppose. In any case, Mike, any sort of parting thoughts on what we've discussed? Now I'll kick it back to Ben and close this out.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been a really good discussion. I think just kind of we're in the age of kind of ressourcement. You look at, Reformed political theory, you look at just Reformed theology in general. I mean, all the books, everything that's coming out, everything that's going to be coming out. I just saw Reformation Heritage Books. They're releasing I think it was John Cotton, I think 5 volumes of his work. So that'll be really important coming up. But I think you see this in our own jurisprudence and, the things that I think the 20th century just forgot and really rejected. And you see the same thing in theology. I mean, the 20th century, I think, it just laid tons of landmines and made life very difficult for us in politics and theology and just the way that we think of ourselves as Americans and as Christians. And I think just being now in an age where we can kind of stand back, and really not standing back, I mean, we're really forced because of events to try to recover this, that this is a time in which we really have to do it. We have to get serious. We have to look at these things that, ages past and regimes past once knew. I mean, that wouldn't have been questioned at all, that the founders certainly wouldn't have questioned. And that, we just, we need to bind together. But again, with, one of the good things that's coming out of a bad thing that, God is allowing us to see, I think, is, the recovery really of the building blocks of civilization, of what we have to do going forward, and too, an opening where more and more people are interested in the church, I think, than maybe for decades and decades and decades. So I think we have to now use all these things for the good of our country, for the good of the church. We have to act. This is definitely a time, I think, of obviously thought. We have to have some plans and some frameworks, but action, I think, is necessary above all. Just so, because we've seen what happens when we cede, basically the whole battle from start to finish to the left, and it's been a total disaster. You see that especially within the 20th century. With communism, with socialism, anarchy, etc., and just the hundreds of millions of people that have been killed because of that. So you see the result of that, and I think that's just a calling card for us to really act right now.
Ben, any parting thoughts from you on anything that we've covered and going forward here?
Yeah, I think it's important to make the case to people that the ideas that we're pushing here are actually Charlie would agree with, and they're part of his legacy. Charlie was not kind of this morally neutral libertarian free speech absolutist. He thought, he was a champion of civil debate, and he was willing to talk to anybody, and that's aspirational for all of us. But every time he talked, he at the same time he was politically organizing behind the scenes. He wasn't waiting for consensus among college students to change the educational landscape or the political landscape. He wasn't waiting for consensus among all Americans before pushing for Trump or organizing voters or gaining donations and building a financial base, a PAC or something like that. Like he was always all of his action had like a moral and a righteous cause, and speech was one important tool that he used. We need to think about speech the same way, but you'll also find when you watch Charlie that there were times where he knew that he was up against the limits of speech, like somebody just foul and hateful spewing, obscenities at him, and he would just say, "Thank you very much. Like, it's over. We're not talking anymore. I can't talk to you." So he understood the natural limits of speech if you don't have somebody who wants to talk to you. And so we need to actually reclaim from these, free speech absolutists like Robbie P. George and others who, are saying that actually Charlie would be against cancel culture, or he would be against the FCC or any kind of free speech restrictions. Like, I think that Charlie is a model in many ways, but there's also in every society there's not everybody is called to be a Charlie Kirk. Some people should lean into that kind of civil debate on college campuses because they're good at it. They connect with the youth. It is their mojo. Other people should be working in government to, restrict injurious speech. These things can go together at the same time. If you work from the bottom and you work from the top, you can really do a lot to shape culture, both with hard civil power and soft law fashion. These things have to go together. And I don't think Charlie would be against that. So we need to, prevent the moderate centrists or the mushy conservatives from, claiming that Charlie's legacy requires us to just liberalism harder. So that would be an exhortation I have for all of us going forward.
That is an excellent note to end on, Ben. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mike. And thank you, listener, for tuning in, as always. Do subscribe, and of course, subscribe to the website as well, and make sure you get our newsletter highlighting lots of our articles and other things we're doing. And until next time, God bless.
You can find American Reformer on the internet at www.americanreformer.org or on x.com, formerly Twitter, at @AMReformer. Don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Please consider supporting us today by making a tax-deductible donation through our secure online donation portal at americanreformer.org. That's americanreformer.org.